Chapter 8. Alex woke, ordered a light breakfast for herself, fruit, a toasted bagel, yogurt, and coffee. Jonas preferred something heavy, a steak and eggs. Then she sat up in bed and gazed around her room. Never had she felt so alone as now. However, she wasn't alone, because sleeping in the next room was Jonas Blackstone. When Jonas sauntered into the living area, Alex was headed to Jonas's bedroom to tell him breakfast had been delivered. She'd known what he wanted for breakfast because he ate one meal a day, and rarely had he eaten past 6 in the evening. However, Alex needed her coffee, fruit, yogurt, and lunch to keep her going. Jonas kissed Alex on the forehead before he sat across from her. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. But I miss my children. I tried calling them, and they didn't answer." "They're in school at this time," Jonas added, reaching for the coffee pot before throwing the complimentary morning paper across the room. He didn't want any bad news this early, because he'd been set on enjoying his morning. "You're probably right, Jonas." Jonas glanced over at Alex. "Where are you going?" He noticed that she had worn a dress to eat. A revealing one, too. Off her shoulders, showing off her smooth tan skin from a few days in Florida. Her legs were as gorgeous as he'd remembered now that they didn't have pants to hide how lovely they were. Jonas had seen Alex in pants most times, and she would occasionally wear shorts when the weather had been suitable in Montana. Very seldom did he get a good look at her in a dress until now, and she was stunning in a yellow dress. "Why don't you let me take you to lunch or dinner later?" Jonas questioned and waited for an answer. Alex rose from her seat after drinking a cup of coffee, turned and paced to the window to peer out. "I have to get some money from the bank Christian wired into my account yesterday." She paused, wondering if she should tell Jonas her plans. She thought it best to reveal to Jonas her plans for today, because she knew he wouldn't stop asking to take her to dinner. They had only each other now, and Jonas needed something to do. Alex couldn't wait until Max made another move. How did she know Max wasn't capable of getting to Christian if he found out that Christian had given her a loan? Max had all kinds of connections, and that was what Alex was afraid of. "I'm having lunch with Christian." She waited for him to respond, and respond he did. Jonas dropped his fork and knife onto the plate, with it making a clattering sound where she turned and strolled in Jonas's direction, and stood at the table. He looked up at Alex. "You're doing what?" he barked. "You heard me, Jonas." "But you can't. You're a married woman." "That's over and you know it," Alex admitted with conviction. She'd finally accepted the inevitable. Now it was time for Jonas to accept it too. Max didn't waste any time getting rid of her, and why should she waste her time thinking and moaning over him? She thought. Jonas stood, and his breathing became shallow. It was all his fault. He knew he shouldn't have pulled Alex into another one of his troubles waiting to happen, because if Max had found out that she'd met Christian through him, that would be it. Max would totally disown him. "Alex, you can't get involved with Christian other than with this business arrangement. You don't know this man. He's too powerful and Max would never forgive us." "I don't give a damn what Max feels or wants. He should have thought about me and you before he started trying to destroy me. What does he want from me? I've given him everything, and he does this to me." Alex marched around the suite searching for her phone and purse, with Jonas following after her. "We just have to give it some time. Max will come to his senses. He loves you, Alex. He just wants you to himself," he said. "You fucking talk to him. Don't you know that's what he wants you to do?" He wants his way with everything. The selfish, dominating prick. He got my children, got me to help you, and then became angry after I saved him the trouble of dealing with your problems so he could carry on with his business. He loves his fucking companies more than he ever loved me, or you, and perhaps the children too. If he loves me, then he will have to work for my love. Alex felt that Max hadn't worked hard enough to keep her, and if he wanted her now, she wouldn't make it easy for him. Alex picked up a book and newspapers on the table. Here is my damn phone and purse. Alex tucked her phone into her purse and headed for the door. I'll meet you for dinner at this steakhouse off Fifth Avenue. You know the one. It's right around the corner from your defunct club. Be there at 8 and wear a tie. Get a suit and charge it to me. Buy some suits, ties, shirts, and shoes, the kind Max would wear. Jonas wondered why he had to buy clothes like Max, and then it came to him why she'd requested that he do this. That's expensive, Alex. Why are you worried? You're not paying for it, and if it was up to your brother, you would be sleeping on the street. Can't you see what he has done, Jonas? The only people who loved him unconditionally, he has tried to hurt and destroy. Why should I love him more than I love myself, and why should you keep faith with him when he doesn't keep faith with you? Alex opened the door, turned, and gazed in Jonas's direction. Alex had given Jonas a lot to think about, and yet he couldn't bring himself to feel anything but love for Max. Max had sacrificed his life to take care of him, Jonas thought. Even if he enlisted a surrogate to do that. Jonas loved the way Alex filled the void when he needed a friend and needed his brother. Standing at the door watching Alex leave and get into the elevator and disappear, Jonas headed for the shower. He wondered why Alex wanted him to buy expensive suits, but then he knew, but he didn't know what the undertaking would be. He just knew that when it was over someone would be injured, and he'd hoped it wouldn't be him, because he couldn't take too much more. He'd been on the edge since his wife died, and too busy to think about it, and he'd been thankful for that. When Alex stepped outside the hotel, a limo was driving up. The driver exited the black SUV, strode up and opened the door. She had seen him on the last trip to the hotel, and he'd been pleasant, polite, and professional. Where would you like to go, Mrs. Blackstone? To the nearest Chase Bank. The driver, a man in his early 60s with gray hair, penetrating knowing eyes, wearing a dark suit, nodded his head, and entered in the driver's side, started the car, angled it into the busy traffic. After driving a short distance to Madison Avenue, to the main bank, a large structure that appeared to take up most of the block, the limo came to a stop, and Alex waited for him to open the door. She didn't want him opening doors for her each time, because lately she'd been doing things like that herself. She'd driven her children to school, bought and carried her own groceries, and gone to PTA meetings like everyone else. She wasn't special, and she didn't want to be treated like a pampered housewife with too much money and time. She just wanted to be Maximilian Blackstone's wife, but that carried its own select advantages as well as a set of misfortunes and problems. When the door opened, Alex stepped out and onto the sidewalk and sauntered into the bank. After opening another account and transferring the money Christian had placed into her account, she strolled out feeling more relaxed than she had been since all this agonizing problems with Max and Jonas began. Climbing back into the SUV, she requested to be taken to Christian's apartment. Looking down at her watch, she knew it was time for lunch, and she would have to meet with Christian, if only to show her gratitude. But damn, he was handsome, with those green eyes and that muscular body which belied the fact that he'd been in a car accident, and he no longer had parts of his body that would have probably attracted her to him otherwise. She let out a sigh. Ah, too bad. He would have made a perfect fake boyfriend, she thought. It was a cruel twist of nature that a man as stunning in looks as Christian, who didn't have a scratch on his handsome face, not a scar on his body that Alex could see except the fact that he couldn't have sex and would never have children unless he'd adopted. Since he wasn't engaged, or had a regular girlfriend that Alex knew of, she thought that his future would be unhappy and unclear. Alex sucked in a breath standing before Christian's door when it opened, and a woman stood glaring at her. She appeared to be in her early 50s, and of Spanish descent. She smiled and addressed Alex in Spanish, where Alex answered her. She said to Alex that she had been Christian's maid for a number of years, and before that, her mother had worked for Christian's father and mother before they passed away. The maid ushered Alex into the same exquisite room that she'd met him in the day before. When she glanced up, he stood in the sunlight, and she thought how handsome a man he was. She remembered seeing Max, who had been older at the time, and she thought there was no man who could compare to him in looks, and then she met Jonas. And now Christian Kenley. However, Christian was a different kind of man. A man who'd suffered not in the ways Jonas had, but in a profound, deep way, and although Alex had been attracted to him, she felt sorry for him. She knew he had to be proud, and she'd never say anything unless Christian revealed his situation to her first. But then he had to know Jonas, and figured Jonas had told her. "You are indeed every bit as beautiful as your pictures. I think I said that yesterday, and if for some reason I was stupid enough not to compliment you on your beauty, please forgive me." He sauntered over to her with his drop-dead gorgeous smile, and his wide shoulders and long legs closing the distance between them. Christian reached for her hand, went to his knees in front of her, and his warm mouth caressed the palm and top of her hand, which startled Alex. He gazed up at her, and his eyes bore through to her core. "What is happening to me?" she thought. "No man has affected me but Max. Maximilian, where are you? Why are you leaving me to flounder and have a man seduce me this way?" Under any other circumstances, she would have repelled Christian's advances, but she knew that they could never have any kind of relationship the way a man and woman would. Therefore, she offered him a warm, attentive smile. And then Christian said the unthinkable. "Would you marry me now that you're a newly divorced woman? Just say the word, and we could be on a plane to Las Vegas. I can get everything arranged with my lawyer, and in a few days you can be Mrs. Kenley." Alex sat back stunned, her eyes wide as her open mouth, and she looked down at this 20-something handsome-looking man and said, "I'm older than you. Surely you can find a woman your age, and I have children." "I don't care, and what are you, 2 years older than me? That's nothing. Your children can be mine as well. I want children." "Why don't you have them?" She didn't mean to say that, and she wished she hadn't because she saw the painful look on Christian's face. Christian stood and sat beside her. "I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. It's been there since you walked into my home, and I knew and you knew about me." "Then how could you ask me to marry you?" Alex questioned. "Because I've wanted a woman like you all my life, and I see my opportunity to have you. If you discover that you still love your husband and you want to return to him, then I won't stand in your way. I'll put that into our contract." "Is that all I am, an opportunity, a contract?" "You are much more, and if you allow me, I'll show you how much more you are to me, and I can be to you. I know you're attracted to me, and I'd be a fool not be attracted to a desirable woman like yourself. If you give me half a chance, you wouldn't miss that I can't have sex with you the ordinary way, but together we can find a way where we both can be satisfied. I know all about you. You have been Maximilian Blackstone's dominatrix." Where did you find that out? I have ways. I'm a man with money, and I don't mind spending it to get and find out the things I need to. Alex pulled away. You're moving too fast for me. I can't think, and I'm still in love with my husband. I can't emphasize that enough. I can't open my heart to you this soon. I don't have any room for anyone but Max. I'm willing to give you as much time as you need. What else do I have to do besides chase the most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on? It was at this time Alex had lost her appetite and her way. She had been flattered, excited, and terrified all at the same time. She had to get away from this young man. He scared her with his proposal. He'd been closer to her age than Max. Max was 8 years her senior, and Max had been her dominant, and she'd been his master in the bed. Never on the outside. Alex and Max had come to an agreement that they'd switch roles when it was needed. Max had called the shots. He'd decided when he should sell off his vast business empire, and she knew it. When she'd asked him to be home with her more and get rid of some of his hotels, he'd placated her and told her he would, but he never did. He allowed her to think that she controlled something. The only thing she'd controlled was him in bed, and now she'd lost that as well. Alex finally discovered that she didn't run anything, not even him. She'd only been a disposable product, like everything else he'd owned. I have to go. I have something very important to take care of, Alex admitted. You haven't eaten, he'd said. She rose with Christian holding on to her hand. I really should go, Alex insisted, looking down at his hand clutching hers tightly. You will be back, won't you? I hope it's not anything I said, or maybe I came on a little too strong. No. No. It wasn't that. But of course it was that, Alex thought. She'd been bewildered and getting more confused since she'd been in Christian's presence. It was all the things she'd dreamed about years before meeting Max. She'd thought she'd wanted a man his age. Handsome, rich, young, tall, warm, and smart. However, he was a few years too late. Where was he when she'd been suffering in Brooklyn and could barely feed herself after college? Where was he when she'd found Max and became pregnant for him, and he didn't realize that she had his baby? Where was Christian when Max had threatened to take away her son, and had done so? She should have run from Max then, but she loved him and she stayed. Now here comes Christian who wants to marry her, and she is torn and still in the same position as she had been in when she'd gotten pregnant for Max, and when he wanted to take her son, and now he wants all her children for what? To control her further. The controlling bastard, Alex thought, as she climbed into the limo and called Jonas. Chapter 9. Jonas, meet me in 20 minutes at the Millennium Hotel, Alex exclaimed as Christian's limo headed uptown to Fifth Avenue. I need to purchase something. Wear your best suit. You did get a suit? Yeah, but they're sending it tomorrow. I thought you were having lunch with Christian. We don't need to talk about that now. I have something to tell you, and I need your advice. When it comes to Christian, the only advice I can give you is stay away, and beware. You didn't say that yesterday. You led me to believe he was a tragic figure who had given up on life, and now I discover that he's not only hasn't given up on life, but he... Look, Jonas, the car is stopping and I have to hurry. Remember, in 20 minutes, meet me at Max's hotel. That wasn't all his fucking hotel. He gave me a share and now he's taken that back. I have to go. And Alex said goodbye to the driver and stepped out once again on the sidewalk of the most expensive property in the world. When a woman like Alex gets depressed, she goes shopping, and that's what Alex had in mind. She remembered this specialty shop around the corner that had women's lingerie, along with handcuffs and crops, and a few more toys. She'd browse the store, and maybe she'd make some finds she hadn't expected. It had been a long time since she had to do this kind of shopping. Everything she'd owned had been bought with Max in mind, because he'd been the only man she'd experimented with. He'd been the only man she'd wanted to be involved with, because she didn't come into this world of BDSM, because this was something she'd enjoyed. She came into that world because of Max, and now he'd left her alone with no one but his brother. And she thought of Jonas as a brother, and nothing more than that. However, after what Max pulled, she felt a strange attraction to Christian with his stunning green eyes, handsome face, wide muscular shoulders, and long legs. Maybe she could introduce him to something that could take him to a new level in his life, she thought, with a wicked smile playing on her luscious full pink mouth. After buying the sex toys and outfits Alex needed, which would be her next attack on Max if all else failed, she strolled over to the Millennium Hotel, one of the most expensive and ornate of Max's properties. Alex strutted through the entrance and found the restaurant, but when she walked in, waited in line for service, no one recognized her. That could be good, and it could be bad for her. What could she say? "I'm Mrs. Blackstone." "I'm meeting someone for brunch," she said in a small voice. She felt as if she'd lost something by not being the wife of Maximilian Blackstone. Perhaps it was that protective feeling she'd experienced for the time she'd been married to the most powerful man in the world. Now she felt like an outsider. Max knew what he had done to her once he'd announced to the world that she was no longer his wife. Alex wanted to cry, but her obstinacy, her steadfast, stubborn nature wouldn't let her. "You have to have a reservation, Ms." The waiter looked over his books. "There are no reservations at 3 o'clock. Then he glanced up at her, and over her shoulder, and Alex saw a knowing glance in his eyes. "But I'm Mrs. Blackstone. Maximilian Blackstone." The waiter's eyes turned back to her. "Mr. Blackstone isn't married, and if you were indeed her, you would know. And may I add, he left explicit orders that if anyone claimed to be Mrs. Blackstone, that they were liars and not allowed to enter at any cost." "She's with me," a low baritone voice echoed. Then a wide smile raced across the host's mouth, reaching his eyes, and Alex turned to see Jonas dressed elegantly in a black suit and white shirt, no tie. Never had she seen him look so handsome. She never looked at Jonas that way before, and she'd forgotten how stunning a man he was when he dressed like Max. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackstone, I didn't realize." The host couldn't stop apologizing. "We have your usual table ready for you. Follow me, please." The host headed to the back of the restaurant, where there were a large array of booths. Since when does Max have a usual table in New York? Alex thought. Jonas placed his arm around Alex's waist, and they strolled to a booth against the wall, where they could watch who came into the dining room. Which was what Max would do at his places of business. After being seated, Alex turned to Jonas. "Did you know anything about this?" she questioned. "I thought he'd sold his properties in New York, and especially this hotel. And when did I have time to find out?" Jonas offered Alex an earnest smile. "I've been taking on the part of a father ever since you moved back to Montana. Why didn't you tell Max you wanted to live in a city? You knew you were miserable out there with open range, wild life, and that fucking snow, and you'd never be satisfied anywhere but in a large city. Yet you let him isolate you where you rarely saw anything or anyone but deer." When Jonas finished his statement, the waiter was standing patiently waiting for them to order. "I know what I want, I'll have the usual," Jonas said. "A porterhouse cooked rare," the waiter repeated as he tapped on a hand computer. Then Jonas realized that he was supposed to be Max, but there was no way he was going to eat a porterhouse. No. No. Bring me a New York strip medium to rare. I haven't had a decent New York strip since I left that god-forsaken place. Since we're eating meat today, I'll have the filet mignon, salad, and a shot of Russian vodka. What? Alex said, looking over at Jonas's expression. I've never known you to drink hard liquor, and never vodka, Jonas said after the waiter left them. You've never known me to do anything, or be anything but who your brother wanted me to be. Now he wants me to be isolated and alone without money, or his love and protection. Don't be surprised at what I do anymore. There is a change coming, and I don't want to hear from you about what I should or shouldn't do, or what Max wouldn't want. Everyone can do what they want, but when it comes to me, they want to keep me in a box and chained to them, even you. But my chains are broken and Max was the one who freed me. I bet he didn't know that would be the results. If I know Max, he had something else in mind. Jonas glanced at Alex, stunned by her admissions. Chapter 10. After a meal with too many drinks, where Jonas managed to wolf down a large steak with several glasses of Johnny Walker Blue on the rocks as his preferred drink of choice, and lived to talk about it, Alex rose from her seat after her one shot of vodka. I have to go to the ladies' room. Do you want me to go with you? Alex blinked her eyes at the absurd question. Go into the ladies' room with me. Have you lost it? I'm not drunk. I should ask you that question, considering all that you've drank. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. You seem upset, and you haven't eaten anything. I know it's bothering you about Max and your children. You look suicidal. Well, you can get that out of your mind. There's no way in hell I'd give Maximilian the opportunity to take my children without a fight. And then there's the matter of all that money that he promised me when I married him. It wasn't for the money that I accepted his proposal. I've never wanted his money. All I've ever wanted was Maximilian, until now. So sit back and enjoy your drink, because I promise you I won't be doing anything that stupid. Jonas knew there was nothing reckless about Alex. After all, she'd been the most focused, even more focused than Max. But she'd been looking frail lately, eating very little, and he thought perhaps what Max had done to her had chipped away at her strong nature. There comes a time when enough pressure is placed on anything, for example, when a tornado passes through, the way Max had passed through Alex's life, and put the ultimate pressure on her where she'd either break or weathered the storm called Maximilian Blackstone. Few have survived even the least amount of pressure whenever Max chose to apply it. Jonas just wanted to be there if she'd fallen, so he could catch her as she'd done with him many times in his life. Alex strolled away from the table, headed for the ladies' room, tucked discreetly in the back near one of Max's offices. She remembered it was there when she'd accompanied Max one year. She hoped they hadn't turned that room into a lounge for the employees as he'd discussed doing. As she neared the area, she recalled that in that particular hall, hidden away, was a private dining area where maybe a few others knew where that elaborate room was concealed. When Max didn't want anyone to see him, and he'd been hungry and had visitors to discuss business over lunch or dinner, he'd have his driver let him and his party out in the back of the hotel. As Alex strolled in the path of the restroom, something caught her eyes, and the familiar sound of a distinct baritone voice laughing. Alex stopped in her tracks. She turned in the direction of this laughter and headed to the dim-lit room, remembering the booth that she and Max had dined in years before, and in that booth sat Maximilian with a blonde. They were leaning into each other, talking and chuckling out loud. Two waiters stood nearby in case Max and his guest needed anything. All he had to do was raise his hand, and they'd anticipated what he wanted, whether a glass of wine, bread, or even butter. Alex glanced at them, remembering when he first brought her there to be alone and to have a quiet dinner with him. She had been so in love the way she still was today, but with one slight problem. Then she was his, and now she belonged to no one. It was at that moment her face flushed in anger. Max can laugh and enjoy his life like I never existed? Does he even know the pain of separation I feel from him and my children, or does he even care? The cold-hearted bastard, she thought. Alex had to find out just what was so entertaining that it would make him joyful, when she was clearly out of her mind, upset to the point where she couldn't think, and if she had been able to think, she would have avoided Max at all cost. Alex strode over to the booth where Max sat with the blonde. She held her head high and sucked in a large breath with her heart hammering in her chest. She had been Mrs. Maximilian Blackstone longer than most, and she'd been the first and had his children to prove it, and nothing would stop her from confronting him today. Not even that little voice that said, "Don't do it." It felt like a long walk to reach where Max sat, one arm resting behind the blonde. Alex wanted to slow down, collect her thoughts, but her body and mind wouldn't allow for that. She found herself standing in front of the two contented people with her sour face and a cloudy mind. Max's piercing serious eyes locked with her clear brown ones. "What are you doing here, Alex?" he said in a shaky, surprised voice. "You have no right to ask me questions anymore. Therefore, I won't ask you what you are doing, because I can see that you are celebrating. Are you celebrating that you've made my life miserable? Because trust me, it won't be for long." In that moment of talk, Alex knew what she had to do. "This is my..." "I'm not interested in what the fuck she is to you, Max." The woman raised an eyebrow and stirred nervously in her seat. What did she expect Alex to do? Pull her from that seat next to Max and have a brawl in his restaurant? At another time maybe, but she wouldn't give Max the pleasure of seeing her make a fool of herself, fighting over a man who clearly didn't want to be with her. Max looked at Alex, raised an eyebrow, and tightened his jaw with a disapproving glance. "Why are your words so coarse and not at all indicative of the woman I once called my wife, or the mother of my children?" Alex bristled at his words. She furrowed her brow and narrowed her glance and said, "You don't get to ask me why I'm suddenly using the F-bomb outside our bedroom. You didn't seem to mind when I asked you to fuck me." "If I remember that correctly, you begged me," Max added, with a chuckle and a grin that reached up at the corner of his sexy mouth. A mouth that had been between her legs and brought her to orgasm over and over in the course of a night. "I think you begged me to tie you up and whip your ass before that occurred. In which case you will want to beg me again, and..." "There you are, Alex." "I was worried about..." Jonas stood in disbelief. Clearly he didn't know when he'd spoken to Max that Max had been in New York all along. "Jack, you know my brother Jonas," Max said, referring to his secretary. "I think you two were good friends once." That was a surprise to Alex. Those kind of surprises were coming fast and furious lately. "Yes, Jacqueline, how are you?" Jonas said, and then nodded. "Good to see you again, Jonas." "Before you fall into this mutual admiration thing," Alex barked, walked close to Jonas and looked at him, and then Max. "So, this is Jack, your secretary. You didn't tell me she was a woman. You and Jonas knew this and kept this from me?" "I didn't think you wanted to concern yourself with my business," Max responded quickly, if not delicately. "Is it your thoughts that I didn't want to concern myself with my children as well? Are you just going to let this woman come in and be a mother to my children, And where are they now? They are well taken care of, Alex. And no one is taking over your job as a mother. So now it's a job being a mother. That I agree, but it is much more, and they will not accept anyone but me. Even if you found no use for me anymore. Alex turned to meet Jonas's eyes. Maybe someone else will discover that I am just what he needs after all. I'll see you in court, Maximilian. And Alex marched off in the direction of the restroom, leaving Jonas standing to talk to a nervous and irate Max. Max raised his hand for a drink and banged his fist on the table when the drink didn't come fast enough.